Hey guys, welcome to Book Review 170. Today I'm going to be reviewing The Great Soul of Siberia in Search of the Elusive Siberian Tiger by Sooyong Park. Now, this book is quite a bit different from what I normally review because it's not, well, it has some sociological elements, but the center stage players are not humans, but as the title would mention, they're Siberian tigers. Um, Sooyong is a groundbreaking researcher in, particularly in how dedicated he was to recording the situations of the Siberian tigers. He put himself in these bunkers that would allow him to essentially camouflage himself and observe tigers in their natural habitat. Now you got to imagine how much dedication this takes. Oh wow, that really just washed out. You got to imagine how much dedication this takes because he has to stay in one spot. He can't move around and follow the tigers. Now, why does he do this? It's primarily because Siberian tigers are one of the most reclusive mammals on the face of the earth. Unlike their um, more warmer-blooded Bengal tiger, their warmer-blooded brethren, or I don't know how you say it, uh, they will essentially run at the first sight, but more specifically, the first smell of any sort of humans. They are very, very keen to get away from human contact. It wasn't always this way. Uh, Before the 1800s, the tigers didn't really have a lot of contact with humans, but during that time period, tiger pelts became in huge demand. And through just a few generations and many, many deaths, the tigers essentially learned to stay away from humans. Now, unfortunately, this still exists even today um, because of poachers, because there is still demand for tiger pelts, particularly within East and Southeast Asia. Um, and actually, tiger meat too, because it's seen as like an aphrodisiac, of all things. Uh, but that's kind of some background to the tiger situation. The center stage is around three, well, a number of tigers within this forest. Within, geez, I'm gonna have to bring the map up. Sooyong Allen Range, which is in a national park just north of Vladivostok. This area of Russia is the only area that still has Siberian tigers. There used to be Siberian tigers also existed within parts of Korea as well as Manchuria. I still think a very tiny, tiny number, maybe like 4 or 5, exist within Manchuria. But the overwhelming majority, I think it's like 150 that are still in the wild, exist within this part of Russia. Now, they're very territorial, so Sooyong Park didn't concentrate on all of the tigers. He concentrated on the range of just a few. Specifically, the first tiger is Bloody Mary. And she was known as Bloody Mary because of when she killed a deer, it was very bloody. As you would be, but I think that she just somehow got that nickname. And with Kaijan, I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, the Great King, she has 3 cubs in the Night of the Beasts. I like that's a very interesting way of putting that. And Kaijan is the Great King. So there are other males in the area, but kind of to the irritation, I'm sure, of some of the other male tigers, the females only want to mate with the male at the top of the food chain. So Kaijan it is. Her 3 offspring that Bloody Mary has are White Sky, White Moon, and White. Oh, jeez. White Sky, White Moon, and White. Oh no! Can't believe I lost it. White Moon, White Sky, and White River. No, that's not it. Okay, jump up. Oh no, I'm not gonna lose. It's White Snow. Jeez. So White Snow and White Moon are females, and White Sky is a male. Uh, and really, this book kind of takes on a tone, uh, almost like a multi-generational um, novel tone uh, of the traits of the older generation and the traits of the younger generation, and passing traits from one generation to the next, skills from one generation to the next, um, kind of the pitfalls of being a tiger within an increasingly or a shrinking range, um, and how it is even to survive. This is kind of personified by the fact that Kaijan has incest with White Moon, I believe, because there are no other males in the area. If there was a greater population of males, I mentioned that maybe some males had previously competed, and that might be part of the example, but there's also the constraint of the fact that there just aren't very many tigers out there. So unfortunately, there's a lot of incest, which can lead to bad genes in the future. I think the author said that maybe one generation wasn't a problem, but if there was incest generation after generation, then there would be definite problems within the genetic pool, and many wouldn't survive. Now, unfortunately, whether it's genetics or not, many do not survive. The first death is the death of Bloody Mary. She gets caught in a trap, escapes, but is going to bleed out, and then one of the local villagers, seeing her what her state is, eventually shoots her. Bloody Mary, the author says, was enraged and actually charged these people until her very kind of soul gave out. And it's very sort of sad. But actually, there were a couple instances before that. I'm kind of jumping around chronologically because I didn't plan this out very well. But there was a time where they actually found out one of Sooyong Park's bunkers, this being Bloody Mary and her almost adult cubs at this point. And it got to the point where they were actually scratching on the door and tearing stuff down. If I was him, I'd be scared shit out of my mind. I mean, these are tigers that can easily rip you limb from limb. But yeah, so also he sees how when they're not ripping his bunker down, he sees how affectionate Bloody Mary can be for her cubs, how she teaches them all these things, how she licks them and makes sure they're clean, fastidiously clean. And he also sees that Kaijan, the Great King, actually shows some affections for his cubs after they're born, which is one of the first times in the wild, or I think maybe it is the first time in the wild, that behavior has been observed. It had previously been speculated, but it's hard proof that male tigers do take care of their offspring to a degree. Not nearly to the degree that the mothers do, but they'll occasionally come by and look after them. The main thing that the males do is maintain their range to make sure no suitors to any of the female tigers, or just their food source in general can come in. That's another thing, is that the food source is not just that their range was shrinking, but also their food sources were shrinking, just as kind of wildlife in general is unfortunately on the decline. There are less deer. Actually, later in the book, when she's an adult, I think it was White Moon, resorted to eating the dog from the local like hunting lodge, and that leads to a little bit of a kerfuffle, but ultimately nothing. Yeah, so unfortunately, Bloody Mary passes away. Her kids are, I think, adults at this point. White Moon. See, now I'm going to mess it up again. No. White Snow. White Snow stays near the coast. That being one of the females. The other female, White Moon, kind of moves more inland towards the mountains. And this turns out to be a fatal decision because there is more game within the mountain ranges and less on the coast. And so when it's their own time to have offspring, White Moons actually struggles quite a bit. And is that right? Yeah. No. White Moon, the one that went inland, her cubs do well, whereas White Snow, that was on the coast, it's actually a very tragic story. Um, uh, well, yeah, I'll tell you this death first, and then I'll tell you the other death. Um, White Snow's uh, children were essentially like starving. And so when she hunted a deer, it wasn't a very big deer. And she took it, and the two offspring, still being cubs at, adolescents at this point, fight each other. This being Mappa and Kaijai Mappa. That's their two names. Let's see here. Kuchi Mappa. Mappa being the female and Kuchi Mappa being the male. So obviously Kuchi Mappa being bigger. They started fighting over this carcass because there wasn't enough meat on them. At which point Kaijai Mappa actually kills his sister Mappa and actually eats a little bit of her flesh before White Snow comes in and essentially breaks it up. But what's even more sad is that Kaijai Mappa survives, but has before she dies, his sister actually does some damage to his front legs, his front limbs, and they kind of heal up, but he has to hang around his mother more. He isn't quite independent. And then later, kind of at the very end of the book, his mother is kind of in the area, and he crosses this road and actually gets hit by a trucker. I know it's sort of coincidental, but the idea being that maybe if he wasn't following his mother around, he might be in a different circumstance, and his death might not have happened. So, unfortunately, White Moon, right? Yeah. No, White Snow. Man, I'm getting these all messed up. White Snow, the one that's closer to the coast, loses both of her offspring. White Moon, whose offspring are easier to remember because nicknamed Hansel and Gretel, actually survive quite well. They look. How did the last chapter end? Yeah, just kind of wrestling around. Oh yeah, Hansel was definitely more aggressive than Gretel was. That's kind of their personalities. I think that's kind of a female-male personality thing within the tiger family, but was particularly acute within this family. So, what have we covered? We've covered Kaijan, the Great King, and Inseminator of all. Bloody Mary, who died. We've covered White Moon, who moved inland and was able to survive because there were more deer there. Both Hansel and Gretel, who survived. White Snow and her offspring that both died. But remember, there was a third son by Bloody Mary, and that was White Sky. And White Sky actually, in his adolescence, died at the hands of a poacher. I think it was some sort of trap or something, and he died as well. So it's really kind of I know I'm just kind of listing deaths, but kind of when compared to or contrasted to the beauty of the night sky, the beauty of the tigers, it's really quite tragic. Yeah, and actually by the end of the book, I cried a couple times in this book, which you can't necessarily say about all the books that I've reviewed or whatever. So just to kind of wrap things up, Sooyong Park also kind of talks about it's kind of interesting because he talks about this very almost novelistic personal relationship that these tigers have among one another, but then also sort of the social trends that led to the circumstances of where they're at. He talks a lot about the native peoples and how they really respected the tiger, and how that there's kind of almost this spiritual, animistic, I think of almost like it's not the same religion, but Shinto. Like I almost think of like similar as Japanese Shinto, where things take on animistic meaning to these people of the forests. And actually, something mentioned in the book is that, and this doesn't have to do with tigers, but the people of this forest believe that birches and willows, I think birches are maybe females and willows are, I think it's willows, are males. And they, for a long time, up until kind of the implementation of modern society, they had no fear of death because they believed that when somebody died, they just became a willow or a birch, and then after the tree died, they would become a human again. Kind of this idea of recycling, kind of that you see maybe in Buddhist texts, but in a much more sort of stripped down, naturalistic form. I guess you'd say. Let's see, what else? Oh yeah, there's a good picture of him kind of in his underground bunker. I think he said that his bunker was normally like maybe 3 meters by 3 meters, something like that. In the middle, they have some good photos of all the tigers that he took. Yeah, I've kind of covered, I guess I covered a little bit more of the tragedy than the beauty. There is a lot of beauty of the tigers in this, but it's just kind of the way that the maternalistic instinct of the moms, kind of the playful, joyful nature of the kids, kind of the stark beauty of the Siberian forests. It really is a beautiful book. And as I said, I cried a couple times. I'm kind of rambling now, so I'm going to close this off. The Great Soul of Siberia, In Search of the Elusive Siberian Tiger by Sooyong Park. Check it out, you guys. All right, bye.